My friends over at Yottamaster have sent me their newest enclosure. This is the Swiftwind. It is an NVMe enclosure with active cooling. So I thought we would go ahead, show you what's in the box, talk about the build quality, take a look at the product as a whole. We'll go over some features and specs. Then we'll do some transfer tests, both real world and some synthetic ones. We'll talk about what I like about it, what I don't like about it, and then we'll close it off with some final thoughts. So here is the enclosure itself. Very, very nice looking. We have the acrylic top here. We have the other sides are all made out of aluminum. We have vented sides on one side with the USB-C 40 gigabyte per second USB-C port right there. And then aluminum again, and then some more vented sides as well. So really nice feeling enclosure. This is, however, a much larger enclosure than I thought it would be. For example, if we set that down, here is the dual bay enclosure from Yottamaster that I've reviewed previously. If we set them side by side, you can see how much larger this new enclosure is in terms of the length, obviously because of the fan. And then I have another solo NVMe Drive enclosure here from SoKiwi. It's a really small one, and we can put that as a comparison as well. And we can see that the size difference is pretty noticeable. So obviously with the SoKiwi, it's a huge size difference in every aspect, right? It is a much larger product. And then even compared to the dual drive, it is quite a bit thicker. It's not as wide, but you know, it's a pretty big thing. So that does take away points for its portability. Now, obviously the reason that it is larger, as we mentioned, is because of that fan, and the fan is a pretty good size. If we take this top off here, taking the top off, we can see the fan is a pretty decent size for a little NVMe enclosure. It does a pretty good job. I can confirm that it's relatively quiet as well for its size. Usually smaller fans are very whiny and loud. So this is actually a pretty good option, and I do like it. Again, the size does take away from its portability though. With the enclosure open, let's talk about the rest of the specs. So as I mentioned, this USB-C port is a 40 gigabit per second USB-C port. We have the ability to use multiple sizes of NVMe drives, 2230, 2242, 2260, and 2280. So that's nice that those are all there. It only supports M.2 NVMe, however, no SATA, so keep that in mind. And they have it listed as supporting up to 4 terabytes of storage. Now, the other things you get in the box is their USB-C to USB-A with the little adapter for USB-C on the end there. So that's nice. It's a very stiff cable, so keep that in mind. We also get a heat spreader with a thermal pad. I've already put this together and taken it apart. So these are currently together, but normally they come a little bit separate. And the little mount for the toolless installation of the drive. So we're going to really quickly set up this Western Digital SN750 into the enclosure. It's a really quick process. So normally you would take the thermal pad, and we'll go ahead and place that over top of our chips on the drive. Line that up like so. Close enough. And when installing the heat spreader, try to install it as close to the pins as possible without actually going over the pins. And the reason for that, you'll see in a second, is for the toolless installation. Makes that a lot easier. So I try to get it as close as possible there, making sure that it's touching the thermal compound all the way across. But I do want that little bit of extra space over here. Now, like you normally would install an M.2 drive, you would put it in on a 35 to 45 degree angle. You would slide it in so that you don't see the pins anymore. We're going to let that sit there. What we want to do is we want to take this little mount and we want to get that over the edge here. And this is why I was saying that we wanted to have that extra space on the edge, because if you put the heat spreader too close, you can't slide this in properly because it'll stop it, right? Because the little nub is going this way. So we want it to be as straight as possible, and then we're going to slide it down, and we have to align it there so that it slides into the slot. And then we can just go ahead and turn it, and now it is locked in place and it won't move. Now we can go ahead and grab our case top and put it right on top, slide it back on, and you should hear a click. and now we're good to go. So I'm going to quickly get this plugged into my computer, and we will do some quick transfer tests. We'll do a real world test with a 2 gig file or so, and then we'll also do a quick synthetic test as well. All right, so we've got the drive recognized in Windows. We can see it here as my external D. And if we look at the devices, it is listed as the ASM246X series. I'm assuming that's probably the controller of the enclosure. And if we go in here, there's nothing in here. So let's do a quick real world test. I'll take one of my S24 videos. We're just gonna drag this over. This file is 2.17 gigs. And I don't even get the window that shows that it was transferring over. So pretty quick, pretty happy with that. Now we're gonna go ahead and run a quick crystal mark. So we will run a quick crystal mark test, and we will come back once that is complete. I'm gonna do it for 4 gigs, and we'll run that. So these are the results, and they're pretty good, but this is when it's plugged into a USB 3.2 Gen 2 port on my desktop. Unfortunately, I do not have a USB 4 port on any of the computers that I have. I don't have anything recent, but what I could do is sneak into my local Best Buy and use one of their computers that has a USB 4 port. And that's what I did. And these are the results. And you can see a pretty significant difference between the USB 3.2 Gen 2 ports and a USB 4 port. And it's just one of the big benefits of this enclosure. Not only the cooling fans and all that kind of stuff, but USB 4 is probably one of its biggest advantages over a lot of other enclosures. The speeds are quite a bit different when you compare them directly against USB 3.2 Gen 2. And it was quite noticeable. Makes me kind of wish that I had a couple of devices that had USB 4 compatibility. So let's quickly talk about some pricing. And right now on Yottamaster's own website, you could buy it for $110 US, or you can buy it from Amazon. They currently have a 20% off coupon. So it is currently $120. With that 20% off, it brings it to just under $96, which is a pretty good deal. And that's with free shipping. So let's talk about some situations where you'll really benefit from the added cost of those 40 gigs per second transfer speeds, as well as the active cooling. And the big ones here are going to be heavy workloads, ones that are going to heat up the drive and use as much of that 40 gigabyte bandwidth as possible. So things like productivity tasks, editing videos, creating music, stuff like that will be pretty good. Photos probably won't use it nearly as much. But editing videos would be a huge one for that. Another situation would be using it as a game drive. So if you install all your games on here and you run your games off of this drive, that's another situation where it'll probably get some pretty heavy use and it'll get pretty warm. The active cooling should help with that. Another situation would be using it as a transfer drive. So moving files between computers. Depending on how many things you're moving, you could be doing it for quite a long period of time. And having that active cooling to keep the drive cool is nice, and then having that added bandwidth of the 40 gigabit per second is also very beneficial. Now, of course, you could also just use this as a simple like additional storage drive, but you really don't benefit nearly as much from that additional bandwidth or that cooling, and you might be better off with something a little bit less expensive. It really depends on your personal use case. Now, the way I'm probably going to be using this is a kind of a combination, either using it as a main game drive while I'll be running games off of it, or I will be putting and installing games onto this drive, for example, Steam games, and then copying them off onto maybe an internal drive on my laptop, my computers, and any test builds that I do to just make things a little bit quicker than having to reinstall games all the time and wait for the internet to do it. If I can do it directly off of a drive, it's usually a little bit quicker. That's probably going to be my main use case for this right now. One thing to keep in mind is that I was unable to get the enclosure to work directly with my phone if plugging the enclosure right into my phone without any kind of other interface. The way that I was able to get around that was using a powered hub. And with that, it kind of determines that my phone's USB isn't enough to power both the fan and the data transfer of the drive. So do keep that in mind, that you may have to use a powered hub in order to use the enclosure with your phone if you plan on using it that way. So with all that said, what do I like about it? What do I not like about it? And I really do like the build of this. It feels really nice and premium. Yottamaster does a fantastic job as always with the aluminum chassis or frames of their enclosures. It makes them very durable. It makes me very confident that they'll last a long time, so I'm happy about that. And the design looks nice with this acrylic top. Now, the acrylic top is a good and a bad. It looks good, but it's also unfortunately probably going to get scratched. And it's going to get scratched very easily. Acrylic scratches very easily. I've already scratched it quite a bit already, even just using it for the last couple days. And that's just a downside of acrylic. It looks nice, but it's more of a form over function kind of situation. You don't need the acrylic. It's not really benefiting the performance of this enclosure at all. It looks nice, and really that's my only downside. I really like the 40 gigabit per second port. That is a huge benefit. It's a really nice addition for this enclosure. And other than that, the fan does a really good job. It stays quiet. I've never noticed it over top of anything else. My computer is normally louder, and even that's pretty quiet. Or the ambient room noise. The fan does a very good job. Usually you worry about small fans like this making a lot of noise, but it does a great job. It keeps things cool. And it does it without being a noisy pest. As always, I will leave links for both stores down in the description below. Those will be affiliate links. If you use them, I really do appreciate it because they do benefit the channel, but there is no obligation for you to do so. With all that said, who would I suggest the SwiftWind to? And if you're going to be using it in a really heavy workload, this is a really great option as an external enclosure. The fan and the 40 gig per second really benefit workloads like video editing, music production, gaming, and heavy transfers. But if you're just going to be using it as a backup storage, getting something even from Yottamaster's line that's under $40 that's not going to have the active cooling and maybe a 20 or 10 gigabit per second port may be beneficial to you because you're not going to utilize the whole 40 gigs or the additional cooling that's required for those heavier demands. So keep that in mind. Also, if you're going to be using this as a portable drive, you're either going to have to be extremely careful so that you don't damage the acrylic, or put into some kind of case or something like that. Also, the size is not great for portability. Like I mentioned earlier, it's quite large, but it is great as an external enclosure. Just wouldn't say it's as great as a portable external enclosure. So do keep that in mind. With all that said, I really do hope you found this video helpful. And if not, I at least hope you found it interesting. If you did, I'd really appreciate it if you like, subscribed. I'd really like to know what you guys think of the SwiftWind. So if you want, you can go ahead and leave your comments down in the comment section below. If you have any questions, I'll try to answer them all as quickly as I can. Big thanks to my patron sponsors, Thoughts Time and Step Back, and thank you for watching to the end of this video. If you do want to see any other videos where I talk about products, either reviewing them, unboxing them, or doing first impressions, hardware and software, you can check out the playlist right up here. And as always, stay safe out there. I'll see you next time.